Okay, yeah, my name is Antje Hottgenroth. I'm from Eli Lilly, and I'm in a similar position like Johan. I'm not an expert in Alzheimer's disease, but I'm a real-world data consultant for Eli Lilly, so covering a lot of disease areas and also seeing what's ongoing in other fields of the diseases. I would like to talk about the industry perspective of the data cube and use and future development, and we already had a good discussion around that, I think. Just a short glance on the industry's perspective about real-world evidence in Alzheimer's disease, and we had heard about that a lot in the previous sessions already, so I will not talk much about it, but also take the chance. Is this to remind on our website where you find all these materials and all the deliverables we produce, and also with a good citation from Frederick from Novartis about the need to have data available to bring treatments to market when they are available. Here is one set of reasons why we do need these data. So that's not all inclusive, but that is more about the late phase needs. And in this previous session, I think we heard from Nice also a more comprehensive list of usages for real-world evidence. But I would like to focus on the real-world data itself, which are needed to produce real-world evidence. We explored that in our work package 3 of the roadmap project. And here you see also Peter Jelle-Weiser from the University of Maastricht. We both had the honor to lead that really engaged group of individuals from academia and pharma to look for appropriate data for Alzheimer's disease and do this landscaping, as Johan was saying, flying with the helicopter, to identify something. And we had also really good pre-work already available. So first of all, we worked on the foundations of the EMIF AD project. They already developed a catalog of data sources, cohorts, basically. So this information was available to us as well as from also EMIF, a catalog of EHR databases. And as Johan was saying, in that project we already had access to a variety of databases, and therefore also seemed to know about their features. And that is a part of flying with a helicopter. And then there was in the project done these digging and scrapping with a brush as well, and then you see surprises, But what are then the challenges specifically for the real-world data? Here you see the opportunities. Opportunities are when you have access to large data sets, you might see better what is happening in subpopulations and in subgroups, better understanding of treatment behaviors and outcomes in the routine, and understanding also the impact on the healthcare system. But there are really big challenges, which are, first of all, understanding the data landscape, the existence first, then is it available? So existence does not mean that you have access to it. Can you really get your hands on the data? And that might not only mean to really retrieve the data, but that you might in any way try to work with the data custodian to analyze the data. So that is meant by that as well. And how suitable they are. And sometimes they are not as suitable as you might think. And also a challenge here, there is no primary source of evidence. You really have to look into various types of data and combine these evidence in order to have a holistic view. And you have these segmentation of data sources and data types, first of all physically, so they are in different places, held by various data custodians. And the data types are also different. You have primary care, healthcare records, you have claims data, which are primary purpose is for reimbursement, and you have hospital data, which are primarily used for the documentation of patients in the hospital. And all that together makes it really difficult to come to a comprehensive data set. And what we heard a lot already, level of acceptance of real-world data is really very different in different stakeholders. But the good thing with the data cube, we solved some challenges, or so to say started to solve, because this data cube is a living entity, it's not a final thing, so to say, as Gloria was already pointing out. We have an understanding of the real-world data landscape, and that is not, let's say, a segmented understanding, because catalogs like EMIF-AD, or forgot to mention DPUK, which is also a broad collection of UK-based cohorts, and the EMIF-AD provided part of that, but now we have combined that here with additional information also specifically for the EHR part. Because EHR data, since they are so broad, are not so well documented to reflect their suitability for a specific disease. Yeah, you might ask different questions to a data source when you investigate diabetes patients or Alzheimer's patients or patients maybe treated in oncology. Then a data source might be more suitable for that or less suitable. And that is the particular challenge also when you are including such a database in such a cube. With a cohort data which are already close to the disease of interest, you might find the metadata more easily, but with the EHR data, you have to go really back to the data owner, to the experts on that data set in order to understand the details for your particular disease of interest. And we had the opportunity to do that with a few which were part of our project. So we have a small representation here with the EHR data, but it would be better to have even more. Okay, so what can we use the data cube for? And to be honest, so industry is also really excited about the cube. You can use it to select most appropriate data sources for research. Again, from a high level, you have to go into the details and brush tools each of the data sources when you are looking into your specific project, but at least you have an overview and can do a pre-selection. What you can do, negotiate with stakeholders on the research feasibility. And maybe that's something we can also discuss with the representatives from NICE, which also gave the point of view in the previous session, how that is helping to really talk about data gaps and what is feasible in order to provide good evidence out of real-world data for a treatment which is coming into market. But last but not least is also the educational part should not be underestimated, because we all know that people are coming and going in their functions or in how they're covering research for disease in pharma companies as well as in academia. You can educate with that kind of cube on data and potential for research with that data. So I'm final with my thoughts about the data cube. but would like to discuss with you your point of view. Any questions?
Questions for Andrew?
Antje, thanks for your presentation. From your perspective as industry, when you look at the current cube is a prototype, right? Wants to show a few things and illustrate it. What sort of information is most needed? What really should be added to the cube that would make it more useful from an industry perspective? Would that be on, I don't know, process of how to contact people, quality of the data? What if you would have to make, say, 2 or 3 requests to the cube development team? What would be your top 2?
That's hard. There are a lot of potential enhancements. Catherine has a top 2, I think.
Well, yes. I think first of all would be the quality of the data. That's, I mean, as you discovered with MMSE, although there was lots of MMSE data available in many data sources, it wasn't consistent. So, and obviously there's going to be issues with how the data is collected. So I think a way of understanding the quality of the data would be ideal. And I think the access is a big issue, especially, it can take a lot of time to get data go through, understanding who is the data owner, the governance process, and that can take a lot of time. So really, with industry, obviously, we're working to timelines. So if getting access to data is going to take a year, we'd rather prioritize a different data source. So I think those 2 are key.
Quality and access.
Quality and access. I don't know if any other industry partners have any other comments.
I would like the third one. It's probably the holy grail. I agree with the first 2, but I think what's also important for us is and I think for every researcher, it's not specific for industry, if you want to tap into the data sources, is what can you expect? Meaning, taking your example of the MMSE, is if I identify 6 or 7 or 20 data sources that might be useful for my research, how certain can I be that what I find there, that I can actually analyze those data sources together? And that's often an issue. You might identify, as you just, MMSE is the nice example, and I didn't even know that, but it's kind of a nice example. If I identify 5 data sources that I can tap into, and they have MMSE data or other cognition data, but it turns out they all do it in a different way, it suddenly becomes from very valuable to what? So I need to do a whole mapping exercise. It's like, that would be really valuable to know. So and as you were going through this, I was actually thinking, is there a way of linking this to the catalog work EMIF has done? That would be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, we talked about that, how that could be done. During the exercise of developing the cube and looking into EMIF AD catalog availability and DPUK catalog items. So we have not a 100% overlap of how the catalogs are collecting the data. The data cube started to be close to the EMIF metadata structure, but it's also not a 100% representation. So the question is there then a mapping to be done and whether that's feasible? So that's something for others to answer whether that is still feasible to do.
So one thing we did, and is not included in the cube right now, is we collected also not only outcomes, but also instruments. So specific tests that each data source are implementing, yeah? So there you have, ADAS-COG, whatever, you name it. But it was such a huge table, actually, because there's like, I don't know, how many instruments did we have?
It was like 100.
150, something like ridiculous.
More or less.
And actually, these didn't look like a cube anymore. So we have those in reserve, but I think that kind of information could be incorporated now. Whether that information is hard to harmonize or not, that would be, I agree with you, that would be incredibly useful, I think. And to link to the EMIF catalog would be relatively easy, to be honest, at least for the data access procedures governance mechanisms and all that, which are collected by the IMIF catalog, but as Antje says, the overlap is not perfect. And also the IMIF catalog is password protected, so you have to log in. So it would be one step more in the process, yeah. We want the data cube to be fully public, to be honest. So immediately accessible for everyone, no login, no registration.
I have also one word of caution. So, and we had these discussions about in the roadmap data cube workshop a lot. So how detailed can you do or provide information in such a cube? Yeah, you can go into one field, like the MNSE as a good example, and for each of the data sources then ask, what is your highest score? How did you do that exactly in detail? But then you have a problem if you want to maintain such a cube and you are collecting without a specific purpose, but just in order to be comprehensive, all that detailed information on each of the items that will be undoable at the end for data sources to really fill in that information and to keep it current. It even might change, so you have to think about the maintenance of that. Yeah, how detailed is the information in order to give you already, when you just go into the cube, a full comprehensive understanding whether you can do a study or your specific study with it or not. So therefore we decided specifically at the beginning to get that in motion, to not go into the detail for the cube, but when you are coming with your project, your specific research question, and make a pre-selection from that, then you already have first, you know that these data are out there, these might be suitable, some of them for your research, but then you cannot avoid to really dig into the details, going into discussions with the data custodians, because they are the experts on their data and you have to talk with them about your research project. To really see the suitability, this toothbrushing.
I'd like to just come back to the data quality issue. So when you use the tripod statement, everything is absolutely crystal clear, and that is the strength of it. But actually also that is the weakness of it, because the amount of data which fits exactly becomes very limited. So we didn't have time within the 2-year framework, but nevertheless, to do sensitivity analyses, does it actually matter if you have a 30-point range on the MMSE or a 26-point range on the MMSE? And does it actually matter whether it's a Swedish version or a Dutch version? Now, it may matter, it may be absolutely critical, but to actually investigate that would be a way of broadening out the opportunity from the data.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Sorry about this. A really radical issue. I'm talking about this afternoon, so I want to get to the bottom of this. The quality of these measures. Now, let's take the MMSE. As somebody who's worked in clinical practice as well as a researcher, it is not a good measure. We only use it because everybody uses it. And in fact, I've heard people with dementia talk about how they cheat. They learn to actually get through this. They talk quite graphically about that. So there's something really very fundamental about the fit for purpose of these measures, actually. But I really value the work you're doing, having said that. But it is an opportunity for industry, perhaps in partnership with people doing different sorts of research, to really get to the bottom of this. Because what we've got really isn't very good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's where, again, we need to have input from a wide range of stakeholders, from the clinicians, the researchers, the HTA regulators, about what, to come to a consensus about, for each domain that we're interested in, what is the best measure to hone it down. No, we don't need a new one. Let's please, no new ones.
Sometimes my worry a little bit is that perfection is sometimes standing in the way of progress, and that in all our debates on what is the perfect way of measuring cognition, we are actually drowning the child with the bathwater, as we say in Dutch. I don't know if that's an English expression. And I think that's happening here. I think it's infinitely more important to reflect on, suppose now indeed, let's hope that we will have an intervention in a couple of years, I think it's now much more important to, for example, time box. How much time should we spend in certain examination, with maybe a little bit in the back of our mind that it will have to be done to a lot of patients, a lot of potential patients, and that we do not want to bankrupt the system altogether. So that we actually focus a little bit on what is it you really need, and structure that a bit more, and then let other people, if you have hobbies, please pursue your hobbies, with identifying that core which is doable.
Actually, one of the other aspects that we discussed related to that, but we didn't have time for in roadmap, is understanding what's the crosswalk between the different, say, cognitive measures. That would be valuable if we decide on one measure, then what does it mean if we want to use a source that's using a different measure? What's the crosswalk between those measures? How does a change in one measure influence the change of another? I mean, that would be valuable to have. So you're right, we just say, right, we'll go with this one, and then we'll use our methodologies to understand what a change in one measure means for a change in another measure.
One more?
Thank you. It's actually in relation to that point. I think I have to agree with Gail and possibly disagree when it comes to not needing another measure. I think that's a symptom. I think the proliferation of measures out there is actually a symptom of the fact that none is doing what it needs. And you're talking about an intervention potentially being down the line. We won't find that right intervention if we continually measure them incorrectly. So there is a validity issue with some of these measures. Some are better than others, absolutely, but that quality piece, if we could somehow attach the quality of the data, both in terms of the completeness and the robustness in the data source, with the quality of the measure and the validity of the measure, I think we could make great progress. But I don't think it's a simple all or nothing. I don't think it's no, we don't need a new measure, or we need to be consistent with the ones we have. I think it is a symptom that they are not maybe doing what they should.
Yeah.
I was just going to make a comment just to kind of support that, because I think I agree, and I'm not completely convinced that we need to come up with something very new and very elaborate. But what I'd be interested in, and I'm not sure whether we have that right now, that in the earlier stages we have something that's predictive and selective and relatively easy to administer. And it could be that that there's a subset of some of the measures that are already out there that we might be able to use for that. So we might not need something completely new, but we don't really have to now. And I think, Catherine, your point was very important as well, because we also need something, especially from our perspective, that correlates with the outcomes that we're traditionally looking at. Like, that's one of the key elements to it.
All right, so let's move on to the last speaker, and then we'll have, with a bit of luck, a little bit more time for questions.